of weird, like being in this space. I feel like I'm on a stage. Welcome back to the apartment. It's been forever since I've been here. I'm finally back in Utah. I've been kind of out of the loop with video making, with art making, with life. This week I was trying to get back in the swing of things, and it really got me thinking. You see, there's one very specific thing that I think artists, me and maybe you alike, run into, and it's a problem. The place where progress goes to die. Perfectionism. So, I made some art this week. We're gonna go through, do some time lapse, talk about this topic, things I've learned and observed, and ways it's applied to my own life. And I hope that it is helpful to you guys. And I will see you after these messages, after this video. I'll see you again. I'll do, the outro. Ah, yes, the perfect topic for this week. And you want to know why? I was literally planning this topic, scripting out this video on perfectionism, and working on a realistic wave painting. Painting and repainting areas and painting over them and then repainting those areas again and having no fun at all. And I realized, Robin, you are literally playing into the same problems you end up describing in this exact video. And after that, I decided to put the wave painting aside, and instead of making that, I made 3 paintings that were completely just for me, entirely whatever I felt like doing. Stuff that was way less about making something I thought would be super impressive or high art, which is definitely valuable too, and I will still continue to do. But this week, it was way more about making stuff that actually made me happy to create. So boo freaking yeah to that. I'm learning, brosif. Okay, but let's talk about perfectionism. Full disclosure, I know it's black and white to rag on this topic completely, but just hear me out. I promise I'll round out my thoughts as we go along. I'm going to put my best guess in and say that this is a common problem with many artists, and many of you. Why I'm supposing this topic is so relevant to artists, though, is because A, I've seen it in action, and it actually does create real problems. B, though, if we're going to generalize and strip out my personal experience, well, artists are humans too, and what normalish human doesn't grapple with their own feelings of inadequacy? And lastly, C, as artists, we are all about that ultra vulnerable practice of creating and putting our painstaking art babies into the world. And what happens when you're a visually, conceptually beauty-driven person? You feel obsessed with making something worth sharing, something perfectly conveying the ideas you've pictured in your head, that perfect execution of materials, imagery, ideas, and you put your pride on the line when you do so. So I get it, we're visual people. We get this idea in our heads of what we want to share, and if it doesn't ultimately fit that initial idealized project vision, well, shite. Maybe, and yes, even a greater problem with perfectionism. It leaves us sitting there in this frozen, no-start state. We sit there paralyzed by the prospect of making anything at all. Do we have any ideas epic enough to share? If we have the ideas, do we have the skills necessary to render them? Do we go outside our comfort zone, or do we limit ourselves to only what we feel confident we can already make successfully? Only draw to our strengths so that we can make something we feel proud of, or something that at least demonstrates to others that we're practice capable and not complete failures. Part of the problem is we can't really fudge it. If we aren't producing up to the standards we've set for ourselves, if our work isn't that perfect blend of heartfelt and deeply skillful, the evidence is right there, glaring us in the face, and anybody else's who might walk by and see it. We have a literal visual demonstration of all of our weaknesses and insecurities, everything we see lacking in ourselves. And once we make something that demonstrates our weaknesses, we can't hide it from ourselves or others. We're forced to stare it directly in the snout, unless we just snatch it straight out of our sketchbooks and throw it away immediately. I remember the days sitting with my sketchbook, pencil in hand, terrified to make a mark, because any mark I made was ready to be a blemish on this perfect, clean book. An empty sketchbook is fine, a perfect slate, unencumbered by my shaky paws, so unconfident, so unsure of what to make and how to make it, so unskilled, unlearned, unpracticed. I remember the days because, for one, that terror of someone walking by and looking over my shoulder to see the horror that is my own inadequacy is burned into my memory. But also because I had a moment like this only yesterday. Literally, the day before I'm sitting here on my computer writing out the script, which I'm now later reading for this video. It's confusing. The thing is, I was home alone. No one was there to see me dusting off my observational drawing skills. It was just me. And that was enough to be terrifying. Venturing into this area of skill that I had neglected and really lost ability in, it's a lot to face. If I continue to do the things I'm most practiced in, I can continue to function with the confidence that brings me. Pretend that's all I am is the skills I can demonstrate when I'm putting my best foot forward and ignore the areas I lack. But when I step outside my normal practice, I'm forced to confront my weaknesses and see the areas which I've slipped in. All this is to say, I want to reassure you of something. If you're sitting at home having followed any of my work, Instagram linked in bio, thinking that somehow I've arrived, let me tell you, I'm still right there with you playing my own head games and dreading my lack of perfect. I'm going to be deeply honest with you and make a confession. What I make currently, well, what I was making before I entered this more experimental phase, / before I sort of took a break from making art altogether these last few months. Whoops. Well, anyways, that strict realism stuff, the waves, the landscapes, portraits, that has been largely inspired by my own struggles with perfectionism. Remember when I said I would round out my thoughts on perfectionism? Well, I'm going to do a little bit of that now. Perfectionism can be crippling, but it also teaches us a lot when we use it. Because I grew up feeling very unable to pull visual information from my memory or imagination, I heavily crutched on realism and reference photos. Growing up, whenever I wanted to portray a creative idea that I could picture in my head but didn't know how to execute, I would become discouraged and default back to copying reality. Copying was something I knew very well how to gauge and measure my progress on. If something looked funny or off, I had all the puzzle pieces in front of me to find the solution. Everything I needed to know was in that reference image. All I had to do was copy it better. I think very often our strengths and our weaknesses are the same, and in this case, it's become evident that my desire to create images fitting my measure of perfect led me to develop both strengths and weaknesses. On one hand, feeling like I was never making something good enough, impressive enough, skillful enough, led me to really push myself to develop my abilities. And I am deeply grateful for that, because even if I do want to continue with this more experimental imagery route, I'm grateful for the skills I can reference in drawing realism into a mix with my experimental and more abstract elements. But, on the other hand, who knows all the places I would have gone with my art, the ways I would have developed certain problem-solving skills that allowed me greater freedom in my subject matter. Who knows what abilities I could have now in conceptualizing an idea, being able to execute it without feeling completely reliant on having to have the perfect reference image first to guide my rendering. Who knows? I think the most absolute issue you can run into with perfectionism, though, really is what I said earlier. It's when it stops you, when it stalls out your progress entirely, when you get so obsessed with making the right thing or the best looking thing that you delay your action, you overthink the simple, wonderful act of making. If you're too obsessed with perfect, then you can never make mistakes necessary to improve. You can never learn about yourself, your interests, what you want, how to get it. My mom said this to me the other day on the phone. Failure is when you stop trying. And that's the thing. Once you stop trying, you've determined the end of your story. You leave yourself no room or ability to change or grow or arrive somewhere new. You just stop. Or you just never start at all. The people who are most successful are the ones that just don't stop trying. They face their own failures and inadequacies, and they keep going until they find the solution and can build their own confidence. If you're struggling to get started or make a mark or accept your weaknesses by putting them to the test, putting them on paper, I want to issue you a challenge. I started reading The Subtle Art of Not Giving Enough for the 4th time. If you haven't already seen it, I talk about the very important art-related concepts in this book in my video Mind-Blowing Art Advice, which I will link below and in the end screen, but I'm going to highlight a specific piece of advice from it and challenge you to follow it this week. Just make something. Even if you're not feeling a proper motivation or like your ideas are good enough or that you have ideas, just make something anyway. Anything. Get out your family album, paint over photos, draw on top of a newspaper image, trace a picture and just start painting into it like a coloring book page. Make a squiggle and turn it into something else. Sit and stare at your foot and draw it, or make a continuous line drawing without looking down at your page and then color into it. The act of creating begins your flow of work. It creates motion, it creates motivation. As long as you are working and going in a direction, you open yourself up to the ability to find creative ideas and solutions, to pivot, to find your style and what you love, to develop your skills. Even if you are making terrible art, if you are struggling with perfectionism and it's keeping you from growing, I want you to change your measure of success from making something beautiful, thoughtful, meaningful, heartfelt, to just making art in general. Making a mistake or making something out of your comfort zone, make that an actual goal. Reassess the way you think about what makes you a good artist to include being a brave artist, willing to make crappy, embarrassing art for the sake of growing. Do it and feel successful for doing it, because you have to make mistakes in order to succeed. And you only truly fail when you stop trying. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you didn't, make sure you let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Start a discussion, finish a discussion, let's talk. We do have our Patreon still up and going, challenges going on there, some promotion for you guys, some different extra videos, reference photos, artwork, giveaways, so check it out. The link is in the description and in the card. I'll see you guys next Friday. Make sure you hit subscribe so you can see new videos when they do come out, and have a fantastic week. Bye.